Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. If you would please take a moment to share the broadcast out. I know that I am on an hour early, but that is because I have some morning appointments that are going to last me throughout the early afternoon. So I wanted to make sure that I kept my word by coming on and sharing with you what God has given me for today. So I'm actually also sharing to my page. So those who want to join us you can actually tag them right underneath my new post if you're my Facebook friend, so they can join in on today's broadcast. So let me see if that link works. And it does. All right. So as you all know, I am not directly live right now on YouTube because I need to increase my number of subscribers. So one of the things that you can help me do as we continue to increase the subscribers is share the broadcast out. Tell people about my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/churchlove333, and encourage them to subscribe there so that we can get back to live streaming on YouTube. Why is this important? It's important because most of us who have less than 1,000 subscribers are actually, many of us, something to say. And sometimes that can actually get in the way of mainstream media's messaging. The earliest example that I can think of right now is what happened with the rapper Nipsey Hussle. All right. A lot of mainstream media outlets were automatically pinning his death on gang violence. But all of the independent media sources that I know that was talking about it, they were actually interviewing people on the ground. They were actually interviewing people that knew Nipsey Hussle. They were actually interviewing actual gang members who were telling us before the news changed their narrative that it was not related to gang violence and that it was not a gang war or something like that. They were telling us then. The gang members themselves were telling us it wasn't us that killed Nipsey Hussle, way before mainstream media changed their narrative. And they were actually able to catch the person that actually murdered him. And it turns out that it was someone who was, potentially doing business with him. So why is it important to have other outlets of media besides mainstream? Because sometimes, most of the time, but sometimes mainstream media does not have the scoop. So, to help independent media sources like myself and others, we rely on you all helping us, sharing our broadcast, getting the message out, supporting what we are doing independently. All right? Most of us are not sponsored. That means no cat has got our tongue. All right? So, we are free to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right? We're not beholden to some secret organization or secret corporation, right, that's telling us what we can and cannot say. So it's very important for us to have your support. So if you would continue to share not only this broadcast, but also share my YouTube page and invite your friends who enjoy the truth in love, because I'm always going to give it to you in love, to subscribe. All right? That's one way you can help me that doesn't cost you $1. Just invite people to subscribe to the page. So good morning, everyone. Again, I know I'm on an hour early, and I want to thank you all for joining me an hour early. The rest of the week, I anticipate will be back to 11 a.m. I am actually recording for YouTube, just not in real time. It will upload after we are done. All right? So that was the first thing I wanted to share this morning. Good morning to each and every one of you who are with us for the first time. This is Daring Dialogues. I'm your host, Shantae Charles. And today is Monday Motivation. My motivation today for pastors and leaders. Pastors and leaders, I've seen a lot of very interesting things happening. Lots of exposing is happening. I know people feel all kinds of ways about exposure. Some people say it shouldn't be done. Some people say it should be done, but in a specific way. Some people say just do it and get it out there. All I'm saying on this is leaders and pastors, whatever you're over, if you're over something in business, if you're over something spiritually, here's just some good basic advice. Own your mistakes. Own how you hurt people. Just own it. That's the best thing you could do for yourself. Own where you messed up. Own where you dropped the ball. If someone says you hurt me, you may not think that you hurt them. You may not even remember the incident, but here's what you can do. You can say, I am sorry that I hurt you. It's never my intention to hurt anybody. It's only my intention to help you and to tell you the truth. Now that you have told me that I hurt you, can you think about what I did? Tell me what I can do to make this right, to repair what has been done to the best of my ability. How can we move forward from this? Are you willing to forgive me? Are you willing to stay under my leadership once we repair this? But we gotta own what has happened. All right? You may feel like what the person is telling you is a figment of their own imagination. But here's the thing. The truth is, it's reality to them. So what are you going to do about it? Because just because you don't think you did anything doesn't negate the fact that they feel that you did, number one. And number two, this is the perceived reality that's coming from them. Now, if you recognize that you messed up, that's not the time to justify what you did. I'm concerned because I see that we don't know the difference between an apology and justifying, an apology and justification. Someone can apologize for how they did something and still not apologize actually for what they did. For example, if someone hits you in public and you say, that hurt me, why did you do that? If they say to you, I am so sorry, I apologize that this happened in public, they're not apologizing for hitting you. They're apologizing for where they hit you. All right? That's difference. That is a difference. So let's make sure we're actually apologizing to people and not justifying our behavior. Okay? So apologize without justifying the unjustifiable. If you harm somebody, if you cause pain and suffering, if you cause a person some loss, all right, physical loss, and repair it. A couple years back, we had an incident with a leader, and on accident, some property was damaged. And that leader, we apologized, and that leader, the apology was not enough. All right? So I went back to that leader and said, what is it that we can do to repair this? What is it that we can do to make things right? Right? The leader said, I'm getting such and such item repaired. I asked the leader, let me know what the repair costs are so that we can make it right. The leader has yet to tell us what the repair costs are. So how can I make that completely right? They may have forgotten. They may have only wanted to see whether or not we were willing to financially reimburse them. We still are. But I need to know what I'm reimbursing, right? I need to know how I'm repairing that. So something as simple as that, just own it. Whether it's by accident, whether it was intentional, whether it was driven by some sort of emotion that you might have been feeling at a time, whatever you have done to upset people, work on apologizing and repair whatever it is to the best of your ability. Now, if they tell you there's nothing you can do to fix this, if they tell you I'm disconnecting from you, right, then you have at least done your part to make things right. We cannot force people into reconciliation, but we can offer it. Let me say that one more time. We cannot force people into reconciliation, but we can offer it. Some of us are not even offering it. Some of us just think that we're right and nobody can tell us otherwise. And how dare somebody, talk about us? You may be anointed, but guess what? All of God's people are anointed. If you are a part of the body of Christ, you have the anointing of God on your life. So that is not an excuse to not repair and not fix what we need to fix. All right. So I also want to talk about this past weekend. I did film a little bit of it here on Periscope. This past weekend, we got a chance to celebrate with some minister friends of ours who have been supporting us in terms of ministry since we began in 2012. And so they just had their 1-year service, and it was a beautiful time. I appreciate the fact that it was an anniversary service, but it was more of a fellowship. It was really just a gathering of believers. There were apostles there. There were prophets there. There were pastors there. There were evangelists and missionaries there. And there were teachers there. And it was not hierarchical. There was no big I's and little U's. Anybody could sit anywhere they wanted. There was food for everyone. There was no designated special tables. We just had a time of praise and worship and exhortation and people praying for one another and us hearing the story of a missionary and the work that they're doing in Central America. And then we benedicted and we went home. Hallelujah. It was beautiful. I wish more of that was happening all across the world and all across the United States. Right? I left it up so people can actually see koinonia. Because sometimes I don't think we understand what koinonia can look like. It doesn't have to be a pre-programmed thing. And then Sunday, we had a great time, right? I ministered the word. My husband and I did a brown bag, meaning we brought lunch, and then we ate it, and then we were about to get on the road. And as we were about to get on the road, a police car rolls up. Now, most of you know, if you've been with us for a while, we actually meet in our local library. We meet in the conference room. And we do that because that's where God told us to meet. He said, I want you to be in the marketplace. I want you to be at the junction between learning and the community. That's where I want you to be. And so we were already out and about, packing up, putting our things away. And then the police car pulls up to the curb. And immediately, it's a K-9 police unit. And immediately we think maybe something is going on in the library that we just left. But no. There's 2 older gentlemen outside, 2 elderly men. And you can see the photograph. It's on my page and my husband's page. There's 2 elderly men sitting outside of the library on a bench, like anybody in public is allowed to do, I'm assuming. And my husband is talking to them and, engaging them as we are packing up. And they're telling us about their family and their life, two elderly men, one with a cane. And the police officer pulls up and says, hey, I got a call that you all are scaring people. That you all, the two older gentlemen, he said, I got a call. Are you all scaring people? I got a call that you all are scaring people and that you're panhandling, you're asking for money. And so we don't know who called. We have no idea who called. But this is what's happening in day-to-day Black America. And we just happen to be there at the right time. I don't want to think about what would have happened had we not actually vouched for the fact that they were just sitting there doing nothing, minding their own business. Two older men just sitting on the bench talking to my husband. And I snapped the photograph because, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Lady Judy. Good morning, everyone. I snapped the photograph because many times when we're talking about these things and we're having these conversations, people think that this is just an anomaly that's happening in America. It's not an anomaly. These are everyday experiences that Black Americans are going through, and many times they don't get photographed or they don't get, right? And so it's really important for us to even photojournalize some of the things that is happening that we see going on, because many times when we're telling our story, especially online, most of the time people don't believe you unless they see an image. It's really sad. So that's why I took the photograph, because I said if we have this conversation online, somebody's going to say it didn't happen, or somebody's going to say you're exaggerating, or somebody's going to say, oh, maybe they weren't old men, maybe they were young men, right? So now we have to photojournalize many times our own experiences because of this. So the incident really reminded my husband and I of why we are in our community to begin with. God sent us there to deal with racial relationships, to deal with racial reconciliation. But again, as we learned, the same word for reconciliation is reparations. And so until our country really starts dealing with what it needs to do to repair Black America, we're going to see these incidences happen. I'm just glad that the incident turned out as well as it did. The officer, here's something for law enforcement if you're listening, because you probably are. The officer recognized that he had been baited into being used as a valet for racial terrorism. He recognized it immediately when he pulled up and he saw two older men just sitting there minding their own business, but he had to follow through on his procedure, which was to go out and check out. Yep. And then once he realized, okay, I've been baited into a situation to harass Black people, he proceeded to say, hey, did anybody see the recent game? Do you know who won the recent game? What did he do? He turned a potentially racialized situation into a humanity situation. And of course, the older men began to tell him about the game, and he began to engage them on their humanity level. And he said, well, nothing's happening here. I'm going to go about my business. You all have a nice day. And really, that should end. But the reality is, unfortunately, when something like this happens or the police are called, you don't know what direction it's going to go. You don't know if you're going to get the police officer like this young man on Sunday who recognized he was being baited, or if you're going to get a police officer who's a race soldier, who's a white supremacist posing as a police officer, and is going to try to force something to happen that's not there. And a phone call is their green light to do that. So you don't know what's going to happen. And what that does, I'm going to tell you about a disorder today real quickly that most of us have probably never heard of. But it actually, to me, really describes what is happening with Black America. And it's called PTED. Most people heard of PTD, but here's PTED. It's post-traumatic embitterment disorder. Post-traumatic embitterment disorder. Let me read you a little bit about it. The post-traumatic embitterment disorder is a pathological reaction to drastic life events and has the tendency not to stop. The trigger is an extraordinary, although common, negative life event. The consequence is severe and long-lasting embitterment. This disorder is not traumatic because of the content of the triggering event connection to the critical incident. Minutes before, the person was healthy. Minutes later, they are chronically ill or severely affected. Now let's get some symptoms of post-traumatic embitterment disorder. Traumatic stress is experienced in the following way. The patient knows the stressor and considers it a cause of the disorder. The event is experienced as unfair, insulting, or as a breach of trust. The reaction of the patient regarding the event include feelings of embitterment, anger. There were no mental disorders prior to the event. Activities and tasks are now impaired. The symptoms last longer. What am I saying? I'm saying that you cannot continue to go through insults, breaches of trust, and unjust and unfair events over and over and over and over and over and over and over again without this. Now, I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a licensed therapist. I am not diagnosing. I'm telling you that that could possibly be what Black America is experiencing. Because the continual insults, injustice happening is continual. It hasn't stopped. So whether it's through laws, whether it's through police brutality, or the black tax on many of the things that have to deal with society and in life, that even with things like buying a house, we pay more. Getting a credit card, we pay more. Our interest is higher than other groups. And so this constant chipping away vanity can lead us possibly to embitterment. And the only way that you're not going to fall into continual embitterment is to ask God to continue to wash your soul, wash your heart, wash your spirit from the things that come to contaminate it and from the things that come to make you stay in a place of embitterment. At this point, you cannot tell Black America that they should not be angry. You can't tell Black people that they should not be irate at their treatment in America. You can't tell men who just did everything the legal way in Florida to petition for their right to vote. And the state agrees that yes, You should now have your rights restored, right? You can't tell them that they should not be upset because they are now trying a poll tax, which is unconstitutional. They're trying to create a poll tax, right? For them to have to pay fines before. It's unconstitutional. All right? If you can see and hear me, please put some hearts on the screen so that I know that you can see and hear me. All right? So Lady Judy, you can see and hear me. Pastor Ben can see and hear me. All right, I'm just doing because I see comments on the screen. So when I don't see any comments, I have to check. All right? So I want you to think about that. What kind of trauma America be experiencing as a collective that needs to be dealt with? There needs to be some resolve brought to it. Lastly, as we go into our second segment, we're going to be reading the end of Tony Evans' chapter, Kingdom Disciples, the chapter concerning the Exodus, and then we're going to go into the very last chapter, which is the community. Last time we were talking about Acts 2 and 44 through 47 and talking about the ecclesia and the signs of God being at work in the ecclesia. What were the signs? The signs were selfish attitude being decreased amongst the body, right? And the fact that they began to share with one another. They began to share with one another. He says, my burden and vision for each local assembly is that its people move more toward experiencing God rather than doing programs for God. Ecclesia is like a marriage. You can't just program a marriage and expect to find happiness. You and your spouse can go out every Friday at the same time, but without any dynamic interaction in marriage, you can program yourselves right on into boredom. We can structure the ecclesia so tightly that even the Spirit of God can't break through and find a slot on the program. The Holy Spirit is the most power source in history. It is time we release him through biblical discipleship to do his job of transferring Jesus' authority to his kingdom people. My desire for you is that you will not approach the four necessities of God's discipleship process as just a formula. Mix this and that, throw in a pinch of the other, and out comes a mature kingdom disciple. Instead, I desire that the Spirit of God will enable you to make these things a living reality as you follow Christ and become his disciple through the context of your local assembly. Don't try to make someone else's experience or spiritual routine your own. God is not trying to make us all act alike. God is not trying to all alike. One more time. God is not trying to make us all act alike. We have a common goal to be fully committed kingdom disciples, but we all don't get exactly the same way. Right? There are some things that even within the context of coaching that I do, I give you principles to follow, but I'm not always going to get there in the same exact way. We have to make room for the individuality that God has set in each and every one of us. So let's talk the community. How can we be better disciples of Christ in our community? As disciples of Christ, believers are to wield kingdom influence and authority as kingdom citizens in our communities. Kingdom citizens are visible, verbal followers as well as the official representation of Jesus Christ. They are to consistently apply the principles of heaven to the concerns and needs of the culture. They are, in fact, kingdom disciples on earth, anticipating the coming kingdom of Christ. Jesus points out the role of kingdom disciples early during his Sermon on the Mount when he tells his disciples to be salt and light. Salt of the earth, light of the world. All right? As salt of the earth, kingdom disciples can use their influence to slow down the expansion of decay engulfing society due to sin. They are to do this in the same way that salt was used in biblical days as a preservative to keep bacteria from decaying meat. Our communities are decaying around us. It is because believers are not functioning as the kingdom disciples he has called them to be in order to benefit the world around them. One of the things that my husband and I and a team of us do periodically is we go into our community, we go into our old town where most of our local businesses are located, and we hold a prayer walk. What is a prayer walk? It's where you go throughout your community and you pray for the businesses. You pray for the area. You pray for the safety of those who are out and about. You pray for community events. You pray that jobs will come to your town or to your city. Go door to door to every single business and we talk to the owners. We purchase something from the owners. We ask what their business goals are. Open to prayer, we ask them, can we pray for your business? And I don't think we've had anybody turn us down for prayer. If you're in business, you know how much you need it. From one fellow business owner to the next. And so we do this as a way to show that we care about the businesses that are in our community, the businesses that come to our community. And we not only want to offer words of support, but we also want to patronize their businesses. So that's one simple way that you can be out and about in your community, actually meeting business owners, supporting their business, and praying for their businesses. As light, kingdom disciples are to be visible, verbal followers of darkness around us. Kingdom disciples are not allowed to be secret agent Christians and spiritual CIA representatives. If accused of being a Christian, there should clearly be enough evidence to convict us because our influence and impact upon the world. When I'm working with a client or when I'm interviewing to work with a client, which I'll be doing, I did last week. If someone were to Google my name to see what I was into or to see what I was involved in, it would be very clear right away if they that I'm into writing, I'm into speaking, right? Gospel. They might find some videos where I've done some television hosting. I would not be able to hide the fact that I am a Christ believer. So they would have to make up their mind as to whether or not they want to engage me in business. Or they can choose to say, hey, we're going to operate bigotry and we're not going to choose not to work with this person because they're a believer. But one thing is for sure, I would not be able to hide the fact that I am a believer. I wouldn't want to hide the fact that I'm a believer, but the reality is I can't hide it. All right? So when he talks about the evidence, ask yourself, is there enough evidence to convict you to the world that you are indeed a believer, that you are a Christ follower? As authorized representatives of the kingdom, equipped by the ecclesia, we are to represent the King as we fulfill our assignments with our Lord's presence and power. Remember, he is Lord over all things through his body. This means that we believers are to think of ourselves as kingdom disciples while we are working as teachers, administrators, engineers, janitors, secretaries, executive assistants, architects, doctors, lawyers, coaches, and even retirees. Whatever our career or whatever our former career, we are to proclaim the excellencies of him who called us out of darkness and into his marvelous light. Now, does that mean running around your professional sphere with a Bible and shouting at people, Jesus saves? Sometimes it's picking up your pen and doing your work and turning it in on time. Sometimes it's getting there before time. My last position, I was known as, outside of my actual work, I was known as the best coffee maker in the building. Why? Because I got there early. I recognized that my fellow educators, much like myself, needed coffee. And so I would go in and I would make the coffee. And sometimes I would have to make 2 pots, because once people realized that there was going to be a regular fresh pot of coffee made, they realized I don't have to stop off at Starbucks. I can go straight to the office and there's going to be a fresh pot of coffee, and I can grab my cup of coffee and I can go about my day. I didn't have to do that. The way that I could showcase that I cared about other people besides myself, and that I was trying to make someone else's morning a good one, even if their morning wasn't going the best, even if their morning was not starting out the right way. They knew that they could come in and they could get a fresh cup of coffee and it would be ready and waiting for them. So something that simple. Sometimes we think that we have to do something big and we have to do something in order for it to make a difference in somebody's life. So, kingdom disciples, good work, and the community. The primary way Jesus says that we are to influence and impact the communities in which we live is through us, both individually and corporately. Good works consist of more than doing good things. You don't have to be a Christian to do good things. The unsaved can build orphanages, houses, give money, and visit the sick. Good works, on the other hand, are divinely authorized activities that benefit others, for which God himself gets the glory. This means that the spiritual is directly connected with the social. A doctor who represents Christ, then, is not just a doctor, representative in the medical field. So those in the medical field see what God looks like when he helps hurting people. It means a lawyer who's not just a lawyer. He or she is God's representative at the Bar Association. So those in the Bar Association see he tries a case. It means a school teacher is more than a school teacher. He or she is God's representative in the classroom, demonstrating what God looks like when he impacts the sphere of knowledge. In other words, kingdom disciples are cleverly disguised as a myriad of things as they use their gifts, skills, and occupation, community involvement, political engagement, and social responsibility to improve the lives of people and advance the cause of Christ and his kingdom. One of my former students, friends with now, and friends with her entire family, I will never forget the impact of what she said to me. She said, I never really heard you say Jesus, and I never really saw you like reading your Bible or doing any of the obvious things that people might be doing in an education setting. But she said, I knew there was something different about you because of the way that you handled students, because of the way that you talked to students. You were always kind. You were always cheerful. Even if there was going on where you had to deal with something disciplinary, you were never rude or you were never in your handling of the situation. You can't imagine what that meant to me as an educator, because there are so many opportunities to be harsh, right? There's opportunities to get students together. There's opportunities to put students in their place. because you have the authority to do that. But the question then becomes, what do you do with your authority? Are you abusing your authority? Are you treating a child less than human simply because you have the authority to do so? Students look at those things. They pay attention to those things. Just understand that. Whether it is praying for and with struggling coworkers, feeding or housing a team, protesting injustice, or a myriad of other beneficial acts, Kingdom disciples help improve the lives of people who are under their influence. They do this, not merely by what they say, but also by the lives of people in the name of their King and his kingdom. One of the things we have challenged each other of our members in Dallas, he says, to do, ask God to show them a person who is hurting for whom they might feel compassion, and then to seek to meet that person's need. When they give the help, they are to give a person a card that says, "You have just experienced a random act of kindness. If you need hope, visit our website." And then they give them our website information. They offer to pray with the person for any need they express, opportunity to share the gospel if they're open to it. As thousands of our members have done this, the presence and impact of our ministry is felt in the community in a positive way. It is the primary responsibility for a kingdom church to develop kingdom citizens who make a positive difference in the society and through their good works. When this is not done, we experience the rampant spread of evil throughout our land. For example, hate crimes as church burnings across our nation are nothing new, but they do reveal underlying racial temperatures in our communities. They began as a way of terrorizing local black congregations by those who did not want them around. They still take place today, along with the addition of an increase in community uprisings, protests. Now, Minister Evans wrote this book in 2017. It's 2019, and we've had 3 black historically black churches in Louisiana burned in three churches burned in 1 week. I keep trying to tell people, and I said it last week, I'm going to say it again. There is a desire to destroy any connected to or can tie us to our historical roots as Black Americans. This is nothing new. When people want to destroy a part of society, one thing that they do is they attack their basis of history, their basis of archive, and their basis of knowledge. So that means attacking anything that is based on the basis of preserving your culture. So it's not just the fact that they burn down a building. Yes, you can build another church, but you're also trying to affect the history. You're also trying to erase parts of a person's history and culture when you attack historic sites. I warned you last week happening in our society with racism and white supremacy, that it was going to start being directed towards the black church. And that people were going to have to stand up and take a stand against this direction towards the black church. A minister puts out what I call a false dream, accusing only the black church of having sin issues that God is going to swiftly judge. Everything about their statement had to do with the black church, black leadership, black people. It was an extremely racist statement. The sad part is there were black Christians that were co-signing the statement, not realizing the underlying bigotry in the statement. truth. Sin has no color. I'm going to say that again. Sin has no color. But we know historically, as we've been learning here on Tuesdays, that sin and the devil and demons were in fact given a color and a description. Big and black. And because in the past, sin was colorized and demons were colorized, you had people who were then taken, interrogated, and then murdered as a result. And so we are moving into the repeat of some very dangerous ground. Very dangerous ground. We have to be careful of what we co-sign in this hour. If someone is going around telling you that only white people or only black people have sin, they are in error. Sin is a human condition. And there's an answer for it, but it's not related to just one ethnos. Anybody teaching you that sin is related to one ethnos is not telling you the truth. So let's end with this last section here, and hopefully we'll be able to continue next week. Kingdom disciples, compassion, and racial injustice. I've been speaking and writing on racial issues for 5 decades now, and it seems that this hotbed of division in our nation, despite progress toward unity in a number of ways, continues to burn hotter than ever. Police brutality, injustice, inequitable living, and educational institutions feed this flame. The forms may have changed, but the anger and hate on both sides of this coin remain. Church burnings were taking place not too far from where I lived in Dallas in the mid-90s. At that time, one particular community in Greenville, Texas, was being targeted, and a number of churches were burned to the ground. In response, city officials, church leaders, and community volunteers rallied together across racial lines in an effort to unify a community that was divided. I was invited to come and speak at the town gathering held at a local high school gym. More than 5,000 members of Greenville's population filled the stadium seats. Represented were individuals from both the black and the white community. As I drove to Greenville that day, knowing the uphill battle this community faced toward reconciliation, I hoped to cast a vision of reunification through a long-range plan centered on the philosophy of the agenda. By then, Governor George W. Bush, later to serve as 43rd president, had also been asked to deliver a message that afternoon to a town that was torn by racial strife and hatred. I had not met Governor Bush prior to then, but a kindred spirit was birthed in that stadium on that day out of a shared desire to see communities restored. This kindred spirit resonated deeply that in his own words, President Bush said that that day influenced national public policy. He said, "I first met Tony 14 years ago at a rally in Greenville. Words not only helped calm fears in Greenville, they inspired me to begin the faith-based initiative. My first executive order as president establishing the White House was faith-based and community initiatives which leveled the playing field for faith-based groups to apply for federal and social service funds. By the time I left office, more than 5,000 organizations, mostly small grassroots charities, had received federal grants. I am both humbled and honored to be a part of God using what had been meant for evil, the church burnings in Greensville, and turning it into good for our nation at large through the faith-based and community initiatives. Since 2001, an increased number of people's lives were positively affected to this unique partnership of providing social services through the ecclesia. The comprehensive nature of this initiative allowed it to be endorsed across political lines. Greenville spawned a nationwide approach to meeting social needs through the some 20 years ago. However, It was simply the replication of a strategy that had been carried out years before that. For me, Greenville is a long line of communities that have faced racial tension and disunity. I have frequently been asked to address communities and cities on the issue of disunity over the last decades, at times in small congregations in local churches, and at other times in football stadiums filled with 20,000 people from that very community. Whatever the size, scalable, and I am convinced that we share a vision across racial divide. What we lack, however, is the implementation of an organized and cohesive strategy on how to bring about the fulfillment of that vision. When less than 10% of the population can affect public policy and cultural climate, it makes me having such little impact. One of the main reasons we are not is because we do not unite around common goals. Rarely do we go outside of walls and join collective arms to bring about a lasting impact. That is essential if we want to change our culture and impact our communities as kingdom disciples for the good of others and to the glory of God. As disciples of Christ, we are to be salt and light through our good works. We are to be kingdom to impact and influence our communities. A kingdom citizen is a follower of Christ who consistently applies the principles of heaven to the concerns of culture. The centerpiece for God's plan of humanity has always been kingdom disciples influencing society. When he told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, God was not merely speaking of replenishing the human race, but to replicate his image through the expansion in history. This image was to even be replicated on a national scale based on bringing people under the rule of God and transferring it to other nations. So the Great Commission is simply the continuation of this kingdom agenda to the world through the ecclesia and the disciples that the ecclesia So I want to take some comments from you all today. Tell me what you think about today's message. Tell me what you think possibility that Black America could be suffering from a prolonged disorder. Tell me what you think about racial reconciliation and what we can do better as the ecclesia, how we can play a specific part in being the solution and not the problem. Tell me what you think about the awesome thing of gangs in LA meeting together for a peace rally and very next peace march, where they actually marched in peace together to promote peace within their community. One person said this, and I thought it was powerful. They said they have done more for crime reduction in the last 72 hours than the police have been able to accomplish in like a decade. Tell me what you think about it. So if you are in my double smiley face, if you want to click on the double smiley face, I am going to be signing off for my YouTubers so that I can upload their video, but I'll wait for you all as we have about 5 minutes here to speak.